I don't know what's worse. Catching him cheating or realizing everyone at that party already knew. The laughter in the video still haunts me. It wasn't shocked. It wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. Like betrayal was part of the entertainment. They clapped when he kissed her. They cheered when she climbed into his lap. Someone even shouted, "Don't tell Maya!" And that's when the room on my screen erupted in applause. I sat there in bed, the laptop burning hot against my legs, the sound of their laughter echoing through a house that had suddenly stopped feeling like mine. He'd told me his bachelor party was simple, quiet, just the guys. And technically, he wasn't lying. It was just the kind of truth that needed dim lighting and bad angles to survive. He called it a mistake. I called it the truth, with bad lighting. My name's Laura. I'm 31. I design buildings for people who believe in permanence. My loft is a catalog of control. Stacked sketchbooks, perfect symmetry, plants that somehow survive the neglect. I like order, plans, things that stand where you left them. Dylan, 35, runs a startup that sells trust solutions for digital teams. He's the kind of man who speaks like he's pitching, even when he's talking about dinner. Disciplined, admired, predictable, or so I thought. The video ended abruptly, a flash of movement, someone laughing off camera, then static. I stared at the frozen frame, his arm around her waist, mouth open in mid-smile, a moment suspended between light and betrayal. It's strange, watching the future collapse in 4K. All that planning, all that precision, undone by a shaky hand and bad lighting. We met 3 years ago in a conference room that smelled like dust and ambition. He was a new client, a tech entrepreneur with too much caffeine in his veins and a startup that was growing faster than its office could hold. He wanted a space that inspired innovation, which in his language meant glass walls, exposed brick, and a place to show off his success. I was the project lead from our firm, responsible for turning his chaos into clean geometry. He liked my sketches, how every line had purpose. I liked his confidence, how he spoke like the world was clay waiting for him to mold it. We built that office together, late nights in echoing rooms, blueprint paper spread across tables. He'd bring coffee, I'd bring order. Somewhere between measuring walls and rearranging furniture, we rearranged each other. Dylan used to say we made sense because we both liked structure. You design buildings, I design systems. We're both architects, just of different things. He called me grounded calm. I called him momentum. He was meticulous, methodical, always 5 steps ahead. When he proposed, it was on the balcony of the same office we'd built together. City lights below, champagne waiting, a drone recording the moment. It felt cinematic, planned down to the second. That's who he was. Everything executed like a pitch deck. There were hints, of course. He liked to keep things on schedule, milestones for everything. First date, moving in, engagement, even love felt like something he tracked on a timeline. And then there was Sienna, the childhood friend he still grabbed coffee with sometimes. He mentioned her casually, like someone he'd outgrown but couldn't quite delete. If love is a structure, I mistook rigidity for strength. I believed that if you built something carefully enough, it would hold. But buildings don't collapse because they're weak. They collapse because the cracks are hidden in the foundation. And I was too proud of the design to look underneath. It started with small things, the kind you almost feel guilty for noticing. His phone began living face down on the counter. Notifications stopped flashing. The little vibrations that once filled the silence of our evenings went mute. Then came the investor dinners. Always last minute, always on weekends. He'd change shirts twice before leaving, switch to a cologne I didn't recognize. Sharper, bolder, a scent that didn't belong in our quiet apartment. When I asked if everything was all right, he smiled. That careful kind of smile meant to calm without committing. You worry too much, Laura. You build problems that aren't even there. The irony wasn't lost on me. A man telling an architect she builds too much. Still, I laughed. Told myself he was right. Startups demand sacrifice. The long hours, the travel, the networking. It was all part of the blueprint for success. But even blueprints can hide rot if you don't check the load-bearing walls. He started sleeping later, scrolling through emails that dimmed his face in the dark. I'd wake to the glow of his screen, the subtle tilt of his body away from mine. When I reached out, he'd murmur, "Go back to sleep." So I did. And somewhere between those nights, I started mistaking silence for trust. That's how love ends, I think. Not in betrayal, but in erosion. Not a collapse, but a slow, deliberate fade where even suspicion feels impolite. I told myself he was just tired, that this was the price of building something big. But deep down, I knew he wasn't building a company anymore. He was building distance. I didn't call, I didn't text, I just waited. The laptop sat open on the coffee table, paused on a single frame. Dylan's face mid-laugh, Sienna's hand resting at the back of his neck like a claim. The apartment felt colder than usual, like even the walls were holding their breath. When the lock clicked, I didn't look up. He came in humming, jacket over his arm, the smell of rain and that new cologne following him inside. "You're still up?" he asked, dropping his keys. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "I was watching something." He glanced at the screen, still smiling. "Another architecture documentary?" "Not quite." When he saw the video, his entire body went still. Not a flinch, not even a sigh, just that quiet tightening of the jaw. The kind of stillness people mistake for control. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "It landed in my inbox," I said. "Accidentally. Funny, right?" He started pacing. "Lara, it's not what you think." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "That's convenient, because what I think looks a lot like kissing your ex while your friends film it. It just happened once," he stammered. "She showed up uninvited. Everyone was drunk. It didn't mean anything." I tilted my head, studying him the way I'd study a flawed design. Not angry, just analytical. "Once?" He nodded quickly, desperate for the smallest mercy. I opened my phone, scrolling, then turned the screen toward him. A timestamp from his calendar app. "Then why did you have brunch with her the following week?" His mouth fell open. "How did you—" "You forget I designed your office, Dylan. You reused your Google Workspace for personal meetings. You left the coordinates right there." He sank into the couch, face in his hands. "You don't understand pressure. You don't know what it's like having people expect everything from you." "Pressure?" I repeated softly. "Pressure doesn't invent a second woman, Dylan. It just reveals the cracks you built into yourself." He looked up, eyes glassy. "I didn't want to hurt you." "That's not true," I said. "You just didn't want to see it happen." For the first time, he was silent, not out of defiance, but defeat. He kept opening his mouth like he might find the right sentence if he tried hard enough, but the air between us stayed empty. He reached for my hand. I didn't move. "I can fix this," he whispered. "We can fix this." I smiled, small, tired, almost kind. "You're confusing me with your code." He didn't get it, so I explained. "Version control. It's your system for tracking every change, every mistake. You can always restore what came before, right?" He nodded faintly. I closed the laptop, the frame of him and Sienna fading into black. "That's the problem, Dylan. I don't want the old version back." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was clean. For once, he had all the words, and I didn't need a single one. After he left that night, the silence felt heavier than his presence ever did. The kind that hums, the kind that wants to be filled with answers. So, I did what I do best. I looked for patterns. Design always reveals itself in repetition, and Dylan was no different. I started with his expense records. Hotel invoices labeled networking retreats, Uber receipts ending near the same two addresses, both belonging to clients I'd never heard of. Then came the travel logs, frequent flights to the same cities, but no calendar entries to match. He hadn't just slipped once, he'd built a system for slipping. At first it looked random, meetings, dinners, off-site team events, until I started charting the dates. The overlaps aligned perfectly with moments of success, product launches, investor funding, major speaking engagements. Every achievement had a shadow beside it. He didn't cheat because he was lonely. He cheated because he couldn't stand not being the most adored person in the room. His need wasn't lust. It was oxygen. Validation disguised as intimacy. The irony hit me so hard, I laughed. a bitter, broken sound that startled even me. The man who built an app about trust metrics had no metric for honesty. He could measure every user interaction, every engagement rate, every piece of feedback, except his own reflection. I scrolled through social media tags, noticing the pattern again. The same women reappearing across years, faces changing but expressions identical. Admiration, attention, awe. He didn't love them. He needed them. And suddenly the anger just dissolved, not into forgiveness, something smaller, sadder, pity, because I saw it clearly now. He wasn't addicted to cheating. He was addicted to being seen. And when the applause faded, when success became familiar, he reached for new eyes to keep the illusion alive. I thought I'd been designing a future with him. Blueprints, foundations, rooms full of light. But I wasn't. I'd been drafting a structure for a man who never knew how to live inside anything that held still. When I closed his files, it wasn't triumphant. It was surgical. Clean. Like finishing a project I'd long outgrown. He built systems that couldn't hold people. I built spaces that were meant to. And somewhere between those blueprints, we mistook function for love. I didn't cry that night. I just turned off the light, letting the room fall into darkness, the kind that feels honest for once. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was just letting the ruins breathe. It's been 7 months since I closed his file, though sometimes it feels like 7 minutes. The quiet is different now. Not empty, just wide. My new apartment sits above a cafe that smells like burnt espresso and rain. The ceilings are high, the floors uneven, and the sunlight comes in sideways through old industrial windows. It's imperfect, but it breathes. Every morning, I wake before the city and sit at my drafting table. I'm working on a proposal for a community center, a place meant to bring people together. It feels ironic, maybe even funny, designing connection after losing mine. But that's the job. You build what's missing. The sketches spill across the table. Open courtyards, glass corridors, quiet corners meant for reading or being alone together. I've stopped obsessing over precision. I leave blank spaces now, places where the light can change its mind. People say time heals, but I don't think it does. Time just gives you room to breathe around the pain. It teaches you which walls not to rebuild. Sometimes, in the late hours when the city hum fades and only the refrigerator fills the silence, I catch myself replaying small moments, not of the betrayal, but of the illusion. The breakfasts, the laughter, the way his voice filled a room. It's strange how grief rearranges memory, sanding down the edges of what hurt, polishing what you shouldn't miss. I used to think closure was a door you walked through. Now I think it's just learning to live with the draft. Last week, I ran into one of his investors at a networking event. He said Dylan had moved offices again. Bigger, louder, all glass and ego. Apparently his new app is about emotional transparency. I smiled politely, like I'd just been told an inside joke the rest of the world would never get. He'll always be building something, I suppose. Another project, another version of himself, and I'll keep designing things that can stand on their own. The difference is, mine will last. Sometimes when I look up from my work, the light hits the wall just right. Warm, imperfect, unfiltered. It reminds me of the night that started this all, the blue glow of a laptop screen, the moment everything broke, and somehow everything began. He told me his bachelor party was simple and quiet, but the video from that night destroyed our engagement. He called it a mistake. I called it the truth with bad lighting. Now, when I think of him, it's like looking at an unfinished building, the scaffolding still up, the windows dark. Something that almost became a home, but didn't. And maybe that's okay. Some structures aren't meant to collapse. But maybe I was never meant to stay inside. Because some designs are never meant to be perfected. They're meant to be abandoned, revised, and rebuilt until the foundation finally feels like your own.